Welcome to A Day in Her Life. I'm your host, Ellie Rinnick, and I am fascinated by how other women make their days work. I am so excited for this mini episode as I sit down with Meredith Cooney, marketer in financial services and the brains behind Money with Meredith, a personal finance business, to discuss all things personal finance. If you, like me, don't feel very well versed in personal finance and perhaps it might be on your goals for 2024, you will definitely learn something from this episode. Meredith shares with us how she budgets or doesn't budget, her biggest tips for people related to personal finance, and what she's learned through the home buying process. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. And as always, thank you for making A Day in Her Life a part of a day in your life. As we start this new year, I am so excited for what we have in store for 2024. It would mean the world to me if you would leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, because it helps others find the podcast and increases listenership over time. If you want more A Day in Her Life, you can always find us on Instagram at A Day in Her Life Pod or subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find on adayinherlife.com. Last week on our newsletter, I shared 122 books I read in 2023, as well as some thoughts about them. Thank you for being a part of this community that we're building, and I am so excited for 2024. All right, let's jump into the episode and have some fun. Awesome. Welcome to A Day in Her Life podcast. Today we have a special mini episode on personal finance with Money with Meredith's Meredith Cooney. Thanks for joining us today, Meredith.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So if you haven't listened to Meredith's episode of A Day in Her Life, it has aired previously, so go check it out wherever you're listening to podcasts. But today we have our first guest mini episode where Meredith is going to kind of dig into personal finance and her passion there. So really excited to have our first guest-led mini episode. Meredith, could you give the listeners an overview of your history in finance and kind of how you kind of found your way back into this passion? That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first started being interested in finance probably when I was in middle school, when my first toy that I bought by myself was a real cash register that I got at Office Max. I was passionate about that toy. I saved up. I remember vividly, it was $120, and which was a lot of money for a middle schooler to save up back in, I don't know, the late 90s, early 2000s. And from there, I was just always had a vested interest in business. I was lucky to be from a family that would talk about things like that. Not necessarily a family that was well off, but a family that talked about finances. So it was something that was common talk at the dinner table or at a holiday or things like that. And so when I decided to go to college and thinking about what I wanted to go for, I ultimately went for finance. And so I went to the University of Massachusetts and I went to the Eisenberg's Business School there and studied finance and really loved it. And part of me always wanted a job that I knew there was some financial security for. So it was definitely part passion, but also part, I think, necessity in terms of I wanted to go to school and have it be fruitful and pay off. So I studied finance and had a really good time there. There weren't that many other young women in my classes, so that was an interesting, I think, experience going through college. So I think there were like one or two other girls that I became good friends with through those classes. We kind of stuck together in that aspect. And did an internship in wealth management my sophomore going into junior year at Morgan Stanley. Really, really liked that, but ultimately decided not to continue in wealth management because you are building a practice. And I knew at some point I wanted to have a family and I didn't want to build a practice at the time. This is my thinking at the time, build a practice and then get to the point where it's really churning and then potentially back away from it. So I decided to go the corporate finance route, which I liked less, but I decided to go that route at the time. I'm 22 or whatnot. So I went to work for a financial services firm. And there I did a 2-year finance rotational program where you get to learn a bunch of different things. And ultimately landed in a trader role where I was a financial trader for 7 years, got some great experiences there, get to, travel and go to dinners and like the whole shebang. And then started to think about, okay, what do I really want out of life? And it was a busy, which is like, of course, I thought that I probably have it, 4 times a day, every day. But it was a rat race. Working in corporate finance as a trader was a rat race in my 20s, and it wasn't necessarily like the lifestyle that I wanted. So, although I love finance, it wasn't quite jiving for me anymore. And so I went back to school for my MBA, which is something that I knew I always wanted to do. And so in my late 20s, that felt like the right time. And I went in not really knowing what I was going to concentrate for. I went to Boston University and I did that part-time after work. So I was working in finance and then MBA at night while like traveling and all sorts of things like that. So it was a really, really busy time. And I was torn between going for like, investment banking type of background because you can concentrate for your MBA in something, or doing more marketing branding. And as I started to take more of the branding courses, I really started to like that. And so ultimately went that route. And then at the same financial services firm I was working at, I was able to make a career switch into marketing, which was really helpful to be able to stay in the same company. At least I knew the company if I didn't necessarily know the discipline or the background. So I've been working in marketing for the last 4 years, but at financial services, and realized I think that I love the branding aspect. I love the component of thinking about how people think and behave and then what to do. And also realizing I think that was the part about finance that I really liked, but it was the personal finance. I find it really it's more psychology than anything. When you think about why people buy certain things, why people behave certain ways, why people have certain beliefs about money, a lot of it's psychology. And so about a year ago, I founded Money with Meredith, which is a personal finance business that coaches individuals to help them get a good, clear understanding of their financial situation, decisions that they may be making, ultimately where they want to go, where they see themselves, and how to help them get there. And so I'm finding it's a really nice mix. And since it's kind of that personal one-on-one, you really have to help people, which is nice.
That's so cool. And such a cool way to kind of figure out one part of what to do with your life, right?
It's totally, yes.
Because I also ask myself that question all the time.
All the time. It's so hard. It really is to know what you want to be doing, what you should be doing, the whole thing.
Would you mind sharing with us kind of how you approach your personal finances and your budgeting for yourself? I've asked that question on the podcast before. That's a personal growth area that my husband and I are undergoing. So love to hear kind of from an expert how you do it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so you may love or hate this response, but I don't budget. I am not I'm not pro budgeter. That does not mean do not recommend people have a plan and are organized. I find a budget to be a little bit restrictive in the fact that if you don't nail it that month, it can make people feel, oh, never mind, and let me throw in the towel. So that's the reason why I'm not budget. A lot of people, many people disagree with that and live and die by the budget. What I love is this method called pay yourself first. And so what that means is you make your plan. So you still need to have a financial plan, but that's different from a budget. A budget would be, these are my, 6 buckets of things that I need to pay for: house, car, groceries, childcare, clothing, miscellaneous fun, dog, whatever it may be, what your life looks like. I'm going to spend this month and I'm going to track it. Whereas a financial plan, and these can go hand in hand. It's not, you could, take some of my advice and still do a budget, but this is the route that I go and I recommend, is that you make a plan of what your long-term goals are. What are the things that you're really looking to do? Is it, I want to buy a house at 40? Is it, I want to buy a house at 25 and a second house at 35 and a third house at 45? Is it, I want to be financially independent in my 50s? Is it, I want to be able to send 3 children to any school that they may choose for, that I want to take care of aging parents, a combination of all of that. and determine how much that is going to cost. And so this takes a little bit of time. You have to sit down and really say, what do you want? Especially if you're doing it with your husband too, right? Like, what do we want? And what does that look like? And how much is that going to cost? And then from there, say, okay, how much is that going to cost and how much time do I have? It's going to cost, let's just say, whatever that dream life of mine looks like, it's going to cost $2.5 million. And let's just say I am 35 and I want to hit those goals at 55. Okay, I have 20 years to get that sum of money. So then you can calculate how much you would need to put away on a monthly basis to hit that goal. That's at the most basic level of it. There are then, of course, a bunch of other accounts to help you get there faster, a lot of tax advantage accounts. But once you do that, you say, okay, that is my goal. And that's realistic and important to me. And I think if it's the important and it's what you visualize, like, oh, I really want my children to be able to go to ballet every single Thursday night and go to school. Like, I really want to take my parents on a vacation, whatever it is that you really, really want to do. I feel like that helps, kind of connecting it to that personal finance is so personal. So connecting it to the personal, I think helps you want to get there. So then you determine, okay, the amount that you need to invest every month to hit those goals. And then out of your paychecks, however, you may be getting paid. So that will differ by person if people are, salaried, or if their, income is inconsistent, or things like that. But you'll want to ensure that you are setting aside that amount before it hits the money that you are going to pay for life with. So before I even start paying my mortgage, my grocery, before I start going out to dinner, I'm going to put aside, let's say it's $1,500 every month, whatever that number is to hit what your goal is. Before it even hits my checking account, I'm going to put that into an investment account and I'm going to automate it. I'm going to automate it so that I can't touch it and it just goes. I don't have to think about it. And I think it's always a good idea to put something into some sort of index fund that you don't have to think about, that has low fees, something that tracks the S&P 500, I find to be a good, safe, clean bet. You can always change things up. Sometimes it's easier just to make a decision to get going. And then everything else that comes in, that's what you have to pay your bills, which are probably also automated. And then from there, whatever is left over is what you have for whatever discretionary things that may be going on in your life. And the reason I don't necessarily set up a budget is, for me, I don't really care if in November I'm spending the majority of my extra disposable money going out to eat, or if I'm spending it on clothes. What matters to me is that I have everything that I've needed to pay for is paid. My investments that I want to commit to are done. And then what I have left over, well, whatever works for me that month works. Like, I don't necessarily, like, the buckets are a little bit limiting to me. So I'm pay yourself first and not budget.
I like that approach. How do you recommend, or how do you advise or guide folks to get started in investing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would advise by starting small, by not thinking that you have to know exactly what you're doing to start investing, and to know that you may make a mistake. I've made mistakes. I consider myself an expert, and I've lost money in certain investments. And I'm not like afraid or ashamed to say that, because you have to start somewhere. So I would recommend you can start with $10. And the way that you can do it is you can open a brokerage account. And so a brokerage account is an account at any online place where you can trade. So names like Schwab, Vanguard, TD, SoFi, you don't open up one of those accounts. They're free to open them. And then you link it to your checking account and you could transfer over $10. And then with that $10, you could decide to buy a component of an index fund. So you could Google index fund, like say you open one at Vanguard, you would Google Vanguard S&P 500 index fund. It's going to give you what's called a stock ticker. And it's a series of letters that represent what you would type in to buy that fund. You type it in and buy it. Now you've bought $10 worth of that fund. If you never do anything ever again, you at least know how to do it and you have that account there. And over a long period of time, it will most likely grow. So I would say open the account, link it, start small. you get your feet wet. It's not as scary as you think. If you can create like an online account for, any sort of place that you shop, you can open up one of these too.
What tools do you use, or what tools do you recommend? Are there any like apps or anything that you recommend to track or to automate, or what?
To bring it all together. Yeah. No, great question. I personally don't use one that brings it all together. I find that I have one brokerage account. I use Schwab. I have a couple different checking accounts. I'd say I kind of keep it simple in terms of the amount of accounts that I have. And then I have my 401k through work through Fidelity. And so I have just those couple ones. I automate everything through where my work paycheck goes. Mm-hmm. And so then I don't really have to necessarily have an app to track it all, because I really would just be checking on the balances. I'm not actively changing things and moving things around too much. Something that I do recommend is like keeping your passwords all together somewhere for something. I find there to be nothing more frustrating than when you're trying to log in and check your stuff and you can't get in. But again, I come back to less is more, and I don't track everything in one spot. And I also don't pay a monthly fee for an app to track or to budget things. I find that you can kind of keep it all together by having less accounts. I also think the classic Excel workbook is helpful sometimes too. I know I did that with Thomas when we were looking to buy a house. I created an Excel workbook and I wrote down the left-hand side, checkings, savings, brokerage, 401k, like mortgage, and typed it all in and just opened up all my accounts one day and typed in the balance, gave myself a snapshot. You could save that and maybe do that, once a quarter, once every 6 months. But I think the beauty of just automating your things from your checking account is that it isn't something that you necessarily have to manage. Mm-hmm.
What are your biggest tips for personal finance for our listeners?
Yeah. Okay. My number one tip is to open up a high yield savings account if you don't have one already. So what this is, it's an online account with a bank that usually won't have a brick and mortar store that can offer you a high percentage yield on your savings. So this is money that you would have for like an emergency fund, or if you're saving up for maybe a vacation, or, just a little set of money that you don't need to grow a crazy amount. You're not trying to do something, wild with it, but where you would have your savings. A high yield savings account is going to yield about 5% more or less right now, versus a traditional savings account at a bank is going to be like 0.01%. So you're basically getting free money by just having your savings sit in that. It takes like 5 minutes to open. They're free to open. You can move your money around anytime that you want. It's not like in some sort of long-term investment account. You do pay taxes on the interest that you earn. So you will get a form from your online bank when tax season comes. But they're super simple. You link it to your checking account. You can transfer over money if you need to. But it's a good way just to increase what you're earning by money that's just sitting. If you have your money in a traditional checking account, you are loaning a bank money and they're making money off of you. So make the money off your own money.
That's awesome. What other tips or trends or things do you think people need to be doing that they might not be doing right now?
Yeah, love that question too. I would say make sure that you know the tax advantage accounts that are available to you and you're taking advantage of them to your fullest if you can. So a tax advantage account is an account where you can put money into it either before you pay taxes, or after, and it will grow either tax-free or not, depending. So things like a 401k, that's a tax advantaged account. So you could put money in from your paycheck. You wouldn't be taxed on that money. And then that money can go ahead and grow. The beauty of that is you might be able to contribute more since you're not paying tax on that money. It brings down your taxable income for the year. And then you would pay those taxes later on when you pull that money out in retirement. or something like a Roth 401k, where you would put that money, you would pay your taxes today, and you put your money into that retirement account, and that money would then grow tax free. And so when you pull it out in retirement, you're not paying taxes on that money or that growth. So that's the one I personally really like, because I anticipate I will make more money as the years go on. So I'd rather pay my taxes now on that money and let it grow. But either are really, really great accounts. Another one that I love that I think slides under the radar sometimes is the HSA. That's a health savings account. And most people will have that as an option if they have a high deductible health plan. Mm-hmm. So if you have a high deductible health plan, you'll probably be offered an HSA. And if you are, run, don't walk for that one. That one is like the creme de la creme of accounts, because you put money into it tax-free, it grows tax-free, and then you can use it unqualified medical expenses tax-free. And then once you're past, I believe it's 65, you can use it for anything. The limits are smaller on how much money you can put in that per year. They're increasing next year. If you're an individual, it's I think 4150, I believe that you can put in. But yeah, those are triple tax advantage. So those are great. So even if you're not at the point that you can max out your accounts or put as much into them, I think just knowing the ones that are available to you via work or based on your income is a great place to start. Because then you at least can be like, okay, I could put money here, here, and here, instead of, putting all of it into a brokerage account. Maybe you want to put more into some of these tax advantaged accounts first. So seeing what your work offers. And then if not, there are IRAs, which are a great tax advantage account as well. Those are an individual retirement account. And those can be really great if your company doesn't offer a 401k. And depending on how much money you make, you can have both and stack them and things like that. That's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And that's where it's a great time to, tap an expert for something like that. But yeah, just knowing what's available to you.
What are some trends or topics or themes that you're working on with people recently related to personal finance?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I would say something that's pretty common is wanting to be able to buy a house, and being able to, and balancing saving up for a house, that time horizon, while also balancing saving up for a retirement and potentially also balancing student loans and some sort of debt. And so so I think something that is really popular is how do you do it all, and really what is in that right order? And a lot of the things that it comes down to with personal finance is that it is so personal. And so it does depend person by person based upon, what the balance is on those student loans, what the interest rate is on the student loans, what type of house are they looking to buy, and when? Are you looking to buy next year? Are you, if it's 7 years, is that? And then what retirement ideally looks like for them. Is it, an early retirement that, you're kind of keeping everything status quo? Do you want a lavish retirement? Do you have no idea, but you just want to make sure you're okay, type of thing? So I'd say it's something really big right now is, and it's probably with like the age demographic of people that I talk to the most too. It's like buying the house and the student loans, and make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot by doing those while also thinking about retirement. So I guess like anything in life, the juggling act, right?
Yeah, and retirement for people our age feels very far off in some ways, but in reality, It's not that far. In the grand scheme.
Totally. And it's one of those things that even if it is far off, the earlier you start, the easier it is. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I love to talk to people about. Is it can seem far off, or it seems like, oh, why does it matter? Or, oh, I'll figure it out when I have the time to think about it, because I don't have to figure it out now. And part of that is right. You don't have to have it all figured out, but if you can start and be consistent in your 20s or even in your 30s, it can make it so much easier. You don't have to set aside as much money, because the time value of money will help you get there. You'll start to compound interest. You earn money on your earned money. So it's like, it's literally your money is just multiplying because you started earlier. And once you have your stuff automated and you get used to that, you're not used to that money coming in. And so it doesn't feel like as much like you're depriving yourself. So you kind of can set that, if you can set that system up earlier, it'll just be easier.
Awesome. And definitely makes a lot of sense. As a new homeowner, what are some things in the home buying process or home ownership process that you didn't quite expect from a personal finance perspective? I know it's very expensive to move. It's very expensive to buy a house. You feel like you're hemorrhaging money for a long period of time. What are some things that came as a surprise to you, or things that you weren't surprised by and planned for that others might be surprised by?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say thank you for the amazing moving recommendation. They were phenomenal and such a great price. So that was super.
If you're in Boston.
We love you. So that was amazing. Something that I learned, that this is a very like minute detail, but this is what popped for me first. When you get your mortgage, it is paid in arrears. So you are paying for it like you're paying November 1, but you're paying for like the prior month. So when you are closing on your home and you will have like closing costs and all sorts of stuff, which are a lot of basically different fees that you'll pay for an attorney, and you'll prepay your taxes and prepay your homeowner's insurance and things like that. You will prepay the amount of interest, assuming you are getting a mortgage on your home, which we very much did. You will prepay the interest of that month going forward. So let's say you are closing on September 15th. You will prepay the interest only of your mortgage from September 15th to October 1. And then on October 1, you will then pay your full mortgage. So it can be advantageous of you to think about when you want to close and how much of that interest you want to pay. If it doesn't matter to you that much about when you close, every day that you bump it out will save you in interest for that month if it's indifferent. And at the beginning of your loan, you pay a lot of predominantly interest relative to principal. And in this interest rate environment, your interest rates are high. In the scheme of everything, it's small, but it's something I picked up on and we didn't care. And so we're like, oh, let's bump it to Monday instead of Friday. And let's save like $500 just by doing that. Because for us, it didn't matter. We weren't moving in yet anyway. We were, finagling contractors and stuff like that. So very small detail, but it can make a difference if the timing doesn't matter for you as much. I would say, in terms of two other things that kind of popped at me. One was the mortgage that we ended up going with. I didn't necessarily think we would. So we went with a 5-1 ARM. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that an ARM is an adjustable rate mortgage and 5-1 is the term. So 5 years. I have a condo, and on that one, when I purchased it, I originally did a 30-year fixed rate mortgage because that just seemed like that's what you do. That's what you hear everyone do. I didn't think twice about it. That's what I did. I refinanced that one and I went down to a 15-year mortgage just because I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive. But then when we were looking at this home, as rates have gotten higher than they have been in the last 8+ years or so, started to think about what our options are. We went with an adjustable rate. And that means that once we hit the 5-year mark, if we don't refinance between now and then, the rate on our home will adjust to market rate. So right now we happen to be at a 6.5% rate. We closed on that, or we secured that rate in August of this year. But if in 5 years rates are at 10%, and we hadn't refinanced between now and then to a fixed rate, that's something that we will then be paying. I felt comfortable going with a 5-1 adjustable rate mortgage because I do believe that within the next 5 years, we will be able to refinance at around that rate, maybe a little bit less. But it helped us secure a little bit of a lower rate getting in. And I think that's something that I'm very happy that we went with, but I do think it's something to really think about and make sure that if that's something that you are going for, to really talk with your mortgage loan officer to understand what that means and to do your research. At the end of the day, they have a job to close the loan, right? And we have seen this in the 2008 financial crisis, where there were a lot of adjustable rate mortgages that were interest only. The one that we have, we were paying principal and interest on our loan, and they were, those loans at that point in time, they were a very poor quality mix of business within them. So I think it's a good time to be open and have some clever options with the loan. And if you have other properties, you can think about, stacking different types of loans. But I would say definitely do your research and understand what type of loan you're getting into if you do want to do something a little bit more creative. And then the third thing I would say is if you're planning to fix anything when you move in, double your budget. It is not going to cost what you think it is going to cost. Once you start seeing options, you're going to like the nicer option. That's just how life works. So yeah, that's the third and final.
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are all great learnings. Anything else you want to share with us about personal finances? Any questions I didn't ask? Any topics you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think we mostly covered them. I would say just an overarching kind of end note on it really would be to, don't be afraid to ask for help on things about personal finance. Don't be afraid to ask other people what they may be doing. I think talking about money can have a little bit of a stigma. And I think it comes from the notion of people bragging about money. And talking about money and bragging about money are two totally different things. Like we all need money to exist in this world, right? Most of us are at a job because we all pay taxes. That's a guarantee in life, right? And so asking for help, asking for guidance, it's not something right now that people are usually taught or that's talked about super openly. So you do have to seek it out a little bit. I'd say there are people who are probably happy to talk about it. I'm one of them. My DMs are always open if people have questions or want to chat or, hey, what do you think about this or that? And the more that it becomes something that you're comfortable talking about, the easier it is. You don't have to get into, specific numbers with friends and things like that. Like there are still things that I don't share or don't ask for, but the idea of saying, oh, I'm thinking, I would love to buy a rental property as an investment. Like, what do you think about it? Just even things like that to kind of have those be conversations in your circle or to seek out a circle that does want to talk about things like that, I think makes it helpful. And especially I think with, if you're someone that's in a relationship or married, I think it's important to have those conversations, too, about what things look like and what you want things to look like and things that are important. I know for me personally, it's not something that we're both obsessed with. Most people aren't, right? I don't think it's the most common thing in the world. So, just knowing like what other people are interested in and comfort level, I think is smart. And, I'd say don't be afraid to ask.
I love that. I love how you said that. Mm. Well, Meredith, thank you so much for sharing some personal finance knowledge with us. Where can people learn more about you and follow along?
They can follow along at Money with Meredith. I am on Instagram and TikTok. And like I said, my DMs are open. So please feel free to shoot me a message.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith.
Thank you.